Thank you for joining me, Wanjiru Kihusa, on this first episode of Bold Moves. Today, I want us to talk about what if you fly? And let me start off by a story that happened to me while I was running still a nonprofit that I founded in 2014 after my husband and I lost our daughter. Now, at that time, I had a couple of employees and my programs manager. Then we were organizing big dinner awards, Still a Mom Awards, and maternal and newborn health sort of conference that was going to have a lot of healthcare workers come in, and we were training them, and we're just generally creating a very big event that included an evening gala that had awards and such. And I was so knee deep into the process. And then my program manager reached out to me and said, "This is amazing. It's such an amazing big event that we are working on." And she asked me in a position of vulnerability, personal sharing. And she said, "Wanjiru, do you ever think or have you ever thought that you could fail?" In that time, I thought, oh my, what a good question. And then I looked back. At first, I was like, I don't think so. But then I looked back and I realized I actually had never sat down and thought, what if Still a Mom didn't work? What if the event didn't work out? What if people didn't come? I hadn't gone into that place in my head of thinking, what if it doesn't work? And it's not because I was full of myself, I was overconfident, or that I was unaware that it could fail, but I had just not spent a lot of time thinking about the possibility of failure. And so I realized it's been a mindset in my life. So let me take a step back a little bit and share my story a little bit. So I am a last born in a family of five. I went to school and I did really, really well academically. I remember my earliest memory of my mom giving me a pep talk was her telling me, "You can do this. You're here on merit and you deserve this." And this was when I had come from my primary school in Nyeri, which is where I grew up, Nyeri, Kenya, and I had gotten a scholarship to go to another primary school when I was in grade 7, year 7, and that's where I ended up doing my grade 8 exams and then moving on into high school. And so here I was on a scholarship, and she was, and just to be clear, I come from a really humble background. I would even go as far as to say we were really poor, but that's a story for another day. But I was in this place where people were wealthy and well-to-do, and I think my mom was just trying to make sure that I get my footing. And she told me, "You deserve to be here. You deserve to be here. You earned this, so enjoy it. And it's not your business who's paying your school fees, but you earned this." And I think from early on, my mom reminded me consistently that I was smart. I didn't hear a lot of "you're beautiful," probably because that's just not the generation she's from, but I had a lot, "you're smart and you can get stuff done." And that sort of got ingrained in me from early on. Moving on, I remember really wanting to go to Alliance Girls High School. For the Kenyan listeners, yes, I went to Alliance, hashtag I went to Alliance. But and I remember it was such a desire of mine. And even though I knew we couldn't afford it, I went for it and I selected it in my final year exams in primary school. And again, I told my mom, "I know we can't afford it, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to apply." And then I applied to a generally good second option, so that in case I didn't get in, I knew I was going to get in, but I knew we couldn't afford that national school fees because again, at that time, my dad had passed on. I am the fifth born, and my mom was unemployed and had recently been retrenched. So I was very aware of our financial situation. But either way, I had told myself, I'm going to get in, and then it's okay even if I go to choice number 2. I want to prove to myself I can do it. And I had really great teachers who helped me and worked with me and believed in me. And so I applied. And then I remember this time we were sitting in the market where my mom would go to sell vegetables. And I came and and a letter came for her. And we opened it in the marketplace, and it said, "Congratulations, you've been offered a place at Alliance Girls." And I was like, oh my God, that's exciting. This is exactly what I was hoping for. And again, I told my mom, I know we can afford it. And but it's okay. I just wanted to get in and prove that to myself that I can do it. And she was like, who told you we can afford? It's not your business where money come from or where I get it. You did your work. I will make sure you get it. Anyway, to cut the long story short, I did eventually go to Alliance Girls High School, and I got and I left there, and I was on full scholarship from an organization, and at some point had some of the alumni of the school also clear some of my school fees, and I went on to have a good experience. Why am I sharing this? It's sort of to just say that I think early on in my head, I got it that I can do stuff. I can do hard things. I can do it. And so the reason why I'm sharing this episode about this experience is I want you to think about it. There's that fear voice that says, what if you fall? What if you fail? But then there's the faith voice that is saying, what if you fly? What if it's amazing? What if it's beyond anything you dreamed about? What if you nail this? What if you get it right? And I want you to think about whether it's a job you're applying for, a project that you want to start, a business that you're thinking about getting started on. Of course, we need that voice of what if we fail, so that we can be balanced and we can prepare accordingly and make sure we we seal any loopholes that can be positions of failure. But at the same time, it's important for us to think, what if you fly? What if it works out? And that in itself is what is called a faith mindset, a mindset that doesn't believe in fear all the time. And so in this episode, I want you to think about brave things, bold things you've been looking to do. And they don't have to be big. They could just be, I want to start going to the gym. I want to start walking, or I want to move to a new country. They could be that big. I want to start going for networking events. There's this thing that I want to do, and I want to try it. And I want just for you to silence the voices in your head and that say, what if you fail, and go into the direction of what if you fly? What if it works out? And so I'm just still sharing my story a little bit on how I came to run Still a Mom, and for me to get to this moment where my program manager was asking me, have you ever thought about if it fails? And so once I was done with high school, I wanted to go specifically to study IT. Now, I didn't do as great as I wanted in high school. I didn't get that straight A that I was hoping for, but I still wanted to chase after IT, which is at that time what I thought I wanted to do, which I don't do anymore. But at the time, that's what I wanted to do. And I remember saying, I want to go chase after this, and this is what I want to do. And so, but I knew I couldn't afford it because at the time, IT was not part of the undergraduate programs that were covered by the government loan scheme, the HELP scheme. And so I decided, I'm going to shift my mindset. I'm going to get where I need to get, but I need to take a different route. And so at the time, I was on scholarship by the National Council of Churches of Kenya, NCCK, and they'd never done a post-secondary scholarship. But I was like, who said they won't do it this time? And so I wrote a letter to the NCCK and said, this is what I want to do. There's absolutely no way for me to afford a university, and could you help me? And thank you so much already for having paid for me the last 4 years of my school. And then I wrote the letter, and then I followed up during the school holiday. I went to their offices on Gong Road, and I met with the head, and I shared my story and I shared my experience, and I asked to be considered for a post-secondary education scholarship. And again, it never had been done before, but they gave me that shot, and they said, we're going to give you 1 year, pick something you want to study. So with this opportunity, I didn't want to squander it, I didn't want to just do what most of my classmates, the ones that now that we were out of high school, what they were doing, back then people were doing what they were called computer packages. So they were doing Excel and Word and Microsoft, and just get understanding the apps in the Microsoft suite. So I wanted to do something a little bit different because I didn't know whether I was ever gonna have a chance to go to college after this. And so I chose to do a diploma in IT. And again, I enrolled, and for a full year, I got the scholarship and they paid. And that's around the same time that I moved out of home and decided to live by myself, which will be probably a story for another day. But again, what if it's a yes? I wrote and I asked and I put myself out there. It could have been a no, but it was a yes. It was a yes with a caveat. It's not going to be a 2-year scholarship. You have 1 year. And so during that year, I worked my ass off and I worked super hard and I got a diploma. I actually remember getting a distinction because I was like, if they have put their money here, I need to show them that I am worth that effort. And so I'm not saying, again, when we are moving away from fear, that we don't need to work hard. Absolutely not. You still have to bring your A game. And so I did this and I got that approval and I finished my first year and it worked out and I finished and graduated with a distinction in information technology. And so after getting my diploma, I remember actually before I was even done, I remember in my final semester, at the same time I was doing this in Nyeri, I had moved out, which I said that would be a story for another day. And I was living in a hostel by myself. And then on one day when I was coming out of class, I saw, Wananchi Online, which now is, I think, Wananchi Group. But at that time, they were called Wananchi Online and they were an internet service provider that connected internet in many homes. I was passing through town and I saw in their offices they were hiring. And so in my jeans and my school bag, I walked in and I knocked and I said, "Hey, my name is Wanjiru and I saw this flyer and I saw you're hiring. Are the interviews over? Is your hiring process already finished or can I participate?" And the lady that I found at the desk was like, "Sure, come in. Actually, we are just wrapping up the last set of interviews. If you don't mind, you can go right in." And again, looking back, it was absurd. It was, but hey, you go with the flow. And so in my jeans and my school bag, I walked in and there was the operations manager and the branch manager, the Nyeri branch manager in the room. And I sat down and I had an interview and it went so well. And then on my way out, they said, they were actually a little bit surprised to see that I didn't even have a CV. But on my way out, they said, "Pass by the reception and please bring your resume for us to see it." And so I left that place, and back then there were cyber cafes. So I went to a cyber cafe and I worked on my resume and I printed it and I brought it. And anyway, to cut the long story short, I got hired. And so in my last semester, actually, I worked full time and I studied in the evenings, which was crazy back then. And now that I have, a child and I'm studying and working, I sometimes miss that part of full-time study. But again, that's a story of what if you fly? Just go in. And, now as I tell these stories, I look back and I realize there have been so many times in my life where I don't want to call it blind optimism, but I've kind of gone like, okay, let's go see how that works out. Again, if it's a no, it's fine. But at least let me go and try. And this is the exact same thing that happened. I went on to then work for about 3 years. So I worked for an Wananchi Group. I worked for Standard Chartered Bank. I did a lot of sales, which look, now I'm not a fan of, but I'm so glad I tried it back then. I also worked with the NIC Bank in Nairobi. And what I was trying to do essentially was just save up for school, save up for that degree program that I wanted. And I eventually did get enough money to get into my first semester. And then, of course, I went to my older sisters and I said, "Hey, I want to do this course. I've been wanting to do it for quite a bit. I have enough money to pay for myself first semester." And I remember I wrote a check to JQuat. It was 76,910. No, 990. And I wrote a check and I felt super duper proud because back then it was a ton of money. That was 2009. Yes, 2009. That's when I got into first year of high school. Of university. And so I resigned from my job at NIC Bank. I moved my house things and I went to Juja, which is where the university is. But before that, I had gone to my sisters and said, "I will pay for the first semester. I need you. I will apply for the government scholarship, the help scheme, but I still will come up short and I need your help paying my school fees." And they were like, "Sure." And again, here's the thing. If you want people to help you, you have got to come with something. You have to, what are you doing on your end? I meet a lot of people who have quite a victim mentality of what they think the world owes them. Boohoo. So, and I'm sorry if that sounds mean, but yeah, everyone is having a hard time. Life is hard for everybody. People are happy to help you, especially siblings, family, loved ones, even strangers on the internet these days. If you needed to, you're in second year and you need someone to help you up pay school, you could create a flyer and you can start a fundraising, a crowdfunding, you can campaign and people can give to you, but people also need to see the initiative. And so that's been my story throughout. And then I would like to wrap up this with founding Still a Mom. And, after we lost our daughter, which one day maybe I will revisit when I'm talking about founding a nonprofit and running a nonprofit. But again, here I was. I'm not a counselor. I am not a psychologist. I had done no training whatsoever in clinical psychology. But when I felt I wanted to start Still a Mom, at the time, it was after we had lost our daughter, and I had written on a blog post back then, sharing my experience and people and asking, "Hey, do you guys know people who can where I can go get support groups that exist?" And then being told no, but a lot of overwhelming Me Too stories and people who are like, okay, if you find a place, please let me know. And so when I did eventually start Still a Mom, is after I did a lot of homework. I met with quite a number of counseling friends and I had coffee with them, and together they helped me draft what would the support groups look like. And then I kind of just began. And so that's also where I want to end today's podcast on. Just begin. Doesn't have to look pretty. And I promise myself it's a continuous lesson, because even I, with this podcast, I was looking online at what are the best microphones? What kind of tripod do I need? What hosting platforms are there? And I was like, oh my God, it's quite overwhelming. But just start. So I began with the little knowledge I knew, with what I had seen on TV, Alcoholic Anonymous kind of support groups. Having worked with a couple of counseling friends, I drafted some sort of structure. I had gone online and seen organizations that had materials online, and I downloaded and I tried to curate something, but I began. So by the time this event, where my colleague was asking me, have you ever thought it could fail? When I look back, it's because I've been practicing. I've been practicing the I can do it mindset. I've been practicing the faith mindset. And so today, as I end this podcast today, I have some homework for you. I want you to look back and just see the cool stuff you've been able to achieve in the past. There's a saying that, you've made it out of all your failures and bad days. 100% survival rate, you're still here. But go back and, with a pen and paper, probably write down the amazing things you've done. You've transitioned jobs. You've gotten married. You are a mom. You're raising 2 children. There's a time you said you were given a tough project at work and you did it. Just call to memory all of those things and remind yourself, you can do this. And so this week, this month, and hopefully the rest of this year, go with that mindset. What if you fly? Thank you for being with me. I'm so grateful for your time. Please talk to me on Wanjiru Kihusa at gmail.com. Leave your comments and reviews on this podcast based on the platform that it's on. And I am extremely grateful for you giving your time. Bye-bye and see you next time.